Hello. Now, today happens to be a Friday, and normally I would not be making a video today. I'd be giving myself a day off to do other jobs and preparing for my usual Saturday morning newspaper review. But something has come up which I consider to be so important that I'm making this video now. And it's this. Ofcom to be given role of policing online platforms. Now, this is why I voiced disquiet about the fact that we don't have a decent opposition anymore. That Jeremy Corbyn mucked things up so completely that there's nowhere in Parliament to push back on anything Boris Johnson chooses to deal with. It's not that I thought Boris Johnson was such a terrible person. It's just that power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. We all know that. And Johnson happens to have almost absolute power at the moment because of what's going on, because of the lack of a decent opposition from the Labour Party or from any other party, come to that. And this is what we're stuck with now. And the other day when Johnson was answering Prime Minister's questions and Jeremy Corbyn was talking about these people who were being deported to Jamaica, or to the West Indies anyway, people who had been convicted of crimes, had gone to jail for those crimes and were now being deported out of the country, most of whom were just awful people and really violent criminals. He was making a big fuss about them instead of saying, well, look, there's this one situation where it might not be entirely fair. Should this law be revised a little bit to take account of these sorts of situations, that sort of thing, which is reasonable for an opposition to say. No, all he was saying was this cruel and vicious government or whatever, and then they're making a terrible. They're doing terrible things to Jamaicans, and that's because they're black, and nobody falls for that. And so there is no decent, serious opposition. And at the same time, there's this. And is Corbyn actually saying anything about this? No, because he would like to do exactly the same. So where's the opposition? This is really bad. It's really frightening. And I hold Corbyn responsible, really, because he is the person, the Labour Party, they're the people who are supposed to be dealing with this sort of thing, pointing up the faults. But I haven't heard anything from them. It's amazing. The Guardian. The Guardian and we YouTubers, we are, in effect, the only opposition that the government has now. Because the proper opposition, the Labour Party, the next biggest party, they're not an opposition anymore. They're just a protest group. And most ordinary people who aren't, keeping up with all sorts of the wrinkles of the news that we're keeping up with, they won't be aware of this. Not only that, but they'll just hear Corbyn banging on about Jamaican criminals being sent abroad, and they'll think, bloody good. And they'd be right. So there's no pushback, there's no correction. And Johnson can get away with all sorts of rubbish, which he shouldn't be getting away with. And as I said, it's not that I rejoiced when Boris Johnson's, when the Conservative Party headed by Boris Johnson got in, because I thought, well, they're going to be much better than the Labour Party, for sure. But then I did say, there's no opposition now, and this is a dangerous situation, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. So here we have Kevin Rawlinson, don't know who he is, the broadcast watchdog, Ofcom, the Office of Communications, is to be handed responsibility for policing online platforms under government plans to be unveiled this week. It is understood. Well, I hope that we've got the wrong end of the stick. The government intends to present its draft legislation on online harm to MPs on Wednesday, despite concerns from some critics that it could lead to censorship. No, it's not that it could lead, it will lead. And it's censorship is one of those things, you know, like those, what are they called, pitcher plants or something. There's these plants where the insect goes in and in and in and in and in and finally ends up being digested by the plant. Among the provisions due to be announced by Nicky Morgan, the Culture Secretary, is the expanded role of Ofcom. It is understood the watchdog is to be given responsibility for ensuring that firms such as Twitter and Facebook comply with a new legal duty of care requiring them to protect their users from illegal material. And this is the point. You can be protected out of existence. If we all stayed in bed 24 hours a day, then we'd probably not be subject to all sorts of crimes and accidents that happen. But then we'd all, you know, get obese and our muscles would waste away. No, this is total nonsense. But the government can do that because there's nobody to push back at them. The government launched its proposals to regulate internet firms more tightly last April, but then they couldn't do that last April. It was believed Boris Johnson intended to forge ahead with the plans in some form after his general election win, though there was initially little detail on how they would work. You know, you start closing down on what people say. And I did mention this before. I was at a demonstration and Tim Pool was there. And this was in London. And somebody, Tim Pool was talking about somebody who had unpleasant views about race or some, I don't know whom he was talking about. But the guy with whom he was talking said, no, he's never said anything that bad. And Tim Pool said, yes, he has. Here, I'll find it for you. And he got his smartphone and started looking for what this person had said. And he couldn't find it. And he couldn't find it because under EU regulations, certain things are censored. So the guy who'd lived his life in London had not heard this ex saying truly dreadful things about race, whereas Tim Pool had, because there isn't that sort of censorship in America. Well, tell me, who got it right? That guy there in London thought that this ex was not such a bad person. And Tim Pool knew he wasn't, but it was censorship that had given this other person the wrong impression. And that's what censorship does. You never know anymore. The Prime Minister turned to Morgan to put flesh on the bones. According to the Financial Times, which first reported the story, I wish I'd have tried that before The Guardian, it will be for Ofcom to decide what would constitute a breach of that duty of care and what sanctions would be appropriate. Well, how would Ofcom know? Because somebody in Ofcom, I want to tell you, there used to be a public censor on theatrical productions, and there was a person, a judge, we'll call him Judge Jones, or whatever, the Right Honourable Judge Jones, or His Lordship the Judge. I don't know what he was called, but I'm making up this this name, and they were censoring theatrical performances. And somebody once said, how does Judge Jones decide on what constitutes a breach of the obscenity laws? And then the answer was, anything that produces an erection in Judge Jones. Well, that's it. Would these people in Ofcom decide on what's bad speaking, like Sargon maybe, Katie Hopkins, David Duke? I mean, where do they decide the cutoff point is? It just depends on them, on their attitudes. Well, of course, that can be completely arbitrary, and it could depend on, how they feel that morning or the sort of people who are picked. It's just awful, this idea that we've got a small group of people who think they know better than us what's good for us to hear and not hear. Under the government's original proposals outlined last year online harms white paper, a website that does not fulfil that duty of care would face a fine, its senior managers could be held criminally liable, or the regulator could demand access to the site to be blocked entirely. Well, you see there. So if the people who are running the website are in line for punishment, they are going to be very, very careful about what they allow on their site. And you're going to get people, I mean, it's just going to be an internet full of kittens. Now, sometimes when I'm feeling a bit down or something, I actually look up these things and watch kittens getting their heads stuck into buckets and that sort of thing. And it's all very sweet and all the rest of it. I might tell you, the ones where you've got horses acting in peculiar ways, very often I can't watch those because it's videos of horses. People who don't know horses wouldn't realise the horses are being abused. You see lots of videos of horses sort of flapping their lips over the side of the doors of their boxes. And they're doing that mostly because they're locked up, and that's nervous behaviour, displacement activity. But that's another matter. At the time, the government was forced to deny the plans would lead to a North Korea-style censorship regime. Yes, it will. With critics concerned that a government regulator with power to block access to non-compliant platforms could find itself deciding which websites British internet users could visit. Indeed, questions also remain on how the regulations would deal with workarounds such as VPNs, which is what I'm probably going to have to get if this is going on, which allow internet users to obscure the origin of online traffic. The original proposal, so, if they're going after VPNs, it means they're going to be checking on our internet numbers and watching us the whole time for any time we go off grid. The original proposals covered any website that allows users to share or discover user-generated content or interact with each other online. A broad definition of that could cover much of the internet. It'll cover all of the internet. There will be no end to it. Ofcom and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport declined to comment. This is a terrible, terrible idea. And who's going to shout about it? Not the Labour Party. I'm sure they'd be all gung-ho for this, possibly even more than the Conservatives. Anyway, that's it. I don't know what to do about it, apart from all of us people on YouTube, and well, that's bad enough, and the other platforms like BitChute and Minds and Twitter and Telegram and all the rest of it. We've got to find some way of letting this government know this is not on. All right, that's it. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.